everyone, welcome to Book of Katherine and Insider Movies. Yes, I am wearing this for a reason. I hope it leaves an impression. It is meant to. It is not easy to wear at all. Let's do this. So this episode is dedicated to two people who I have fallen in love with. That is James Randi and Korem. They are two people that I've been talking about on Twitter lately. And they both have a history of outing con artists on television. And unfortunately, that was a time in television before 1992, when before astroturfing became really big. And you can see astroturfing coming into TV with things like, before astroturfing used to be on things like Montel Williams and things like that, where Montel Williams actually says on a radio show, like, yeah, they bring money to me. I don't believe in psychics. I don't believe in them at all. I know that they're total frauds, but, you know, they bring me a lot of money. So it's like paid to be on TV, even though it preys on people who are in distress, people at the worst moments in their lives. That's who they make their money off of, you know, $700 an hour, you know, for people who are at their worst moments in their lives. So that's what ministries and charities and nonprofits are supposed to be built for. And instead, the entire like psychic industry is built on that. And, you know, and really it's just magicians. You can become a magician or you can become a psychic, you know. But now there's this other thing that they reveal, which is another type of con, which is the faith healing con industry. And now I'm learning that there's a whole another industry out there, which I will go into. So, but the more I get into it, the more I'm learning about like what's happened since 1992, like our media before and what they used to out, like when they were acting like a real media and exposing like liars and con artists and people who lie deliberately, and how we've completely reversed in 180. And now when they out a liar or a con artist on stage, the liar or the con artist will actually say on stage, "You ideological bigot." That's what they'll say. Like when they're on a show and the person's like, "Yeah, well, I have something right here. I dare you to go ahead and say this." And the person will get so enraged, which is narcissistic rage, if you question their narcissism. And that's what all of this comes down to. Like these churches that say, hey, if you pay us money, you'll become rich. You know, that's playing on a person's narcissism. It makes the church focus on themselves. It makes every person in that body, you know, when they're putting church, when you see a church that lines money up on stage and the pastor is dancing in the money and saying, you know, let's bless money, and it's all about the money, when their actual name has dollar in the name. And the people are just, you know, when the actual ministry is like prosperity ministries, it's got money in the name. You know, that's just the worship of money. It's the exact same thing as the Luciferian church. And we already knew that George Soros was investing. We knew George Soros was investing in the churches, and I just didn't look into any of the names that he was investing in. I said, like, we knew George Soros was investing in the churches. Well, now I'm finding out what they're actually teaching. And they're actually teaching opposite things than their actual, like, Bibles teach. Like I said, like, I grew up in church, and I may have left it and everything like that, but I at least know what it taught. Like, I at least know what it taught, and now they're teaching the exact opposite. So it's like, we're talking like 180. So for those of you guys who are like atheists and stuff, it's so funny because you guys are like arguing this stuff out there, and you're not even aware that the Christian churches aren't even teaching it. Like, they aren't even teaching it anymore. Up there, the pastors are just like, Jesus wasn't the Son of God. He was just man. He was just walking around and then he got saved. Sorry, I just was like, everyone's angry. It's such a great trick the left did, because they got everyone to fight when they all believe the same thing. Like, they don't, it just is hysterical. They're so brilliant. So it's just, you know, and they're all where both sides worship money. They got both sides worshiping money. It makes it so easy, you know, so that's why both sides, you know, hang out with celebrities, the top officials at both sides. Like if you watch Benny Hill and stuff like that, the people he hangs out with are the Pope, and the Pope hangs out with the left. Like at the top of the echelon, the 1% of both sides. They hang out with Darryl Strawberry. They all hang out with the top. It's just the top of the 1%. And I'm just like, and both sides, whether it's the Christian church on this side or it's the communists on this side, they both want to get at that money. One just wants to get at it by taking the taxes this side, and the other side just wants to get at it by, yeah, I'll buy it by giving it to my pastor. If I give it to my pastor, you know, God will reward me with a ton of riches, you know, and that's the way to get it. Either way, it's like, you know, a way to get money, and it's self-centered. It's centered on yourself. It's not outward focused. And if you look at these ministries, both sides, left and right, like if you look at both sides, like Clinton Foundation, they rake in billions, right? They give away at most they've ever given away is 10% of their wealth to charity. The most, it's usually 4 to 5%. You look at these Christian ministries over here when they finally get to their financials, from Hillsong to like Benny Hill to like this church in North Carolina that has these like 5 pastors. There's like this one kid running it, and he wears like sweatshirts and everything. This massive mega church in North Carolina. And he's like with a list of pastors that are like out. He has a group of pastors. There's like no elders. They elected themselves. He's linked to like pastors of mega churches in like Dallas and Seattle and everything like that. Then when they're financially, they all live in mega $1 million homes. And then you look at their financials, they give it the same amount to charity. Like 5 to 10% of their wealth goes to charity. I'm like, it's the freaking Clinton Foundation. It's like identical. They all have the same mansions. It's the 1% on both sides. On both sides. And they both think the same thing. They both think the same thing, that Jesus was just a man walking around. No different. And they both think they're little gods walking around. And I'm like, oh my God, George Soros and the 1% was genius. So I just think it's hysterical. So I want to dedicate this to Danny Korem and James Randi, who were around before and were trying to teach people about con artists, and who are probably like dying. Or I know James Randi, I've seen speeches he's done now. He's just like, what has happened to us? Like, what is it? He thinks everyone's a media whore. And I'm like, yeah, well, when we keep pushing, you know, money, 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 you know, when we have a censorship blackout and stuff like that, and the only thing that we are ever told is to worship money and never look around at each other and maybe help each other out instead, like maybe have compassion for one another, you know, displays of compassion, maybe help each other out, maybe that will make you feel good. You know what I mean? Like, I was thinking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if people think that, like, on my channel, they think I'm some kind of prosperity because I'm always talking about how to get your money, how to keep your wealth. Let me talk to you about what my life is like. Like, let me talk to you about, let's get realistic about what my life is like. When I try to earn money for myself, I get online and I give. Now, let's be honest. If we talk about like what I get in donations and stuff like that, you know, the hours I work is not remotely close to like what I give. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I could take all this information and hold on to it and put it on a book and hold on to it and wait and give it to a publisher and all that sort of thing, and just wait and give it to a publisher and make sure that I make all that money on it and stuff like that, and make sure that, you know, take everything I know about hospitals and take all, and I could make bank on it. Don't you think? Don't you think I could make bank on it? Take all the knowledge that I know and make bank on it. Do you think that I don't know the people that could make that happen? But I've learned in my life that, like, you know, like, you kind of have, like, community and the way you interact with the community, and it's paid off, hasn't it? Like, it is paid off. The way I've gotten better, the way I've gotten better, and the way I've gotten healthier is by reaching out and giving what I have. Like, does that make sense? Like, investing in the community around me. Like community service. You know what I mean? Like, you know, no, I'm not able to give anything like that, but I mean, I never did the tithe thing or anything like that, but like, I'm not able to donate. There was a time where I used to have charitable foundations and stuff like that. I was able to do stuff like that. And I used to give to abuse, and I used to give to this one thing. I even gave to that Boundaries place for a little while because I really, really loved that book, Boundaries. That Boundaries book just changed my life and really got me healthy. So I even gave to that Boundaries book place for a while. But abuse centers for women, like shelters for women, there are hideaway shelters for women and things like that, because those related to me. So like that's where I gave my charitable giving. But when I'm poor and I can't give, then I give with my time. Does that make sense? Like that's how, but I invest in community outreach. Like always, because I just know. And of course, I always did that anyway. Like I did that anyway. Like, and so I'm just kind of like, yes, you have to hold on to your money and you have to be wise, and it brings money back to you. Like I'm getting healthier and I will become, like I will return. I do think someday my wealth will return. I'm hoping the more healthy I get, but I know that won't return to me unless I pull myself out, and I know part of pulling myself out is like getting out there and sharing what I have and getting invested in community and touching you guys. You know what I mean? Like reaching out as much as I can. It doesn't mean putting my faith in another human being, one human being. You can't do that. You know what I mean? And that's cult-like behavior. And part of that's it. Like I have had brushes with cults and I've learned that. So I'll have to do another thing on cults. And that's not an insider movie at all. Like I'm going to have to do another recording on insider movies. So I'm going to have to retape a whole thing. But that's my rant on what has happened in, it's really, the left played both sides. The Soros, I was wondering where that money went, and now I know where that money went. And so this Insider Movies will be dedicated to them. So I guess I always do long intros to Insider Movies. So there you go. I'll keep going. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about James. You guys, I'll link it below, the skipping of the intro like I usually do. So, all right. So let me tell you a little bit about what James Randi did and Danny Korem. They both outed James Heydrich. Now, you might be like, oh, I thought only James Randi outed James Heydrich on that show where he put the little things around and showed that he was blowing it. Like James Heydrich couldn't do the blowing trick anymore because he put the styrofoam. Actually, Danny Korem actually went to James Heydrich's place and went to his place in like Salt Lake City, went in and actually got James Heydrich on tape to confess that he was a fake, confess that he did it by magic trick, confess why he did it, confess how he learned, where he learned, confess that he was a convicted felon, that he served jail time. And like that kept people kept psychics off of television for a while. Like that scared psychics off of television for a good long time. Like it was extremely effective. So people talk about James Randi and stuff like that. And I think that's because of today, because atheists seem to know James Randi. But Danny Korem, he turns out to be a Christian, which I didn't know that. I was watching all the tapes and stuff like that. But I'm also finding out that, and this proves my other point, which is that I saw a tweet that Dave Rubin did. And he was tweeting out that there was a girl that was like, can you actually get along and talk and communicate with a person that doesn't have the same faith or values as you? Is that really possible? I'm starting to think it might be when I watched Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro talk. And I was like, the fact that we're even asking ourselves that question in the United States of America, that was actually founded 250 years ago with freedom of religion in the Constitution. We didn't ask that question until recently. Like that question was never asked. And it's such a sign. It's such a sign that they are trying to divide us, that the media and the astroturfing is trying to make us ask those questions. And the hate networks are getting on there and saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And and there's all this hate out there and stuff like that, and trying to divide us. And that, there are communities that don't want to assimilate. We know that now through the Muslim Brotherhood and stuff like that actually do say you can't talk and you shouldn't talk and there should be no talking and we should be divided and things like that. But it is not the majority. The majority of us know how, if you actually pay attention to your daily life, we're able to go around and talk, but we're so scared to because we watch online and everything online tells us that everyone hates each other. And that's really, really sad because it's not reality. We get amongst reality and We are able to talk to one another. And that's what you have to trust in, is what you react with every single day, which is why if you don't have to, don't get online, you know? But it is a testimony to the fact, if you look before 1992 and all this astroturfing and the internet that just started, the info ban that I talked about in the Illuminati cards that was coming, that they said was coming, the info ban, when they banned all this information and they wiped all this history offline, you know, two different people of two completely different backgrounds, of an atheist background and of a Christian background, both were outing the same kinds of con artists. Like, both were outing faith healers, both were outing psychics, both were doing it on television, and both felt the exact same way about it. Not only that, but the big Tilton church, the big faith healer, you know, Diane Sawyer did a big ABC and like crushed the guy's church. He was this big Robert Tilton or whatever. She did this big thing. Do you know all the footage on that thing? Did you know all the footage she got for that show of the dumpster in the back, of all him throwing away all the faith healing bracelets and all that stuff? All that footage was got from a Christian ministry that's a watchdog against faith healers. And that Christian ministry has to take on all the people who call them afterwards and say, my loved one died. And the media down in Australia watched that expose of Benny Hill and all the people who die because of Benny Hill. Because Benny Hill's people tell you, you are healed. You don't need your medication anymore. And because you have faith, if you know, hold on to that faith, you don't need it anymore. So they stop their chemo treatment, they stop their MS treatment, they stop they stop everything. And they die. And that Australian documentary takes you by their grave sites. But because Benny Hill says it's up to you and your faith, he says, notice I never say you're healed. I ask them if they say they're healed. And it gets him off the hook. It is a testimony to the world before 1992, when we, as a common core, we didn't talk about, you'll never notice on any of those shows, they're not talking about like, oh, what faith are you? You'll never hear them talk about whether or not Randi is an atheist or not. You'll never hear them talk about whether or not Danny Korem is a Christian or not. You know what I mean? Like, that was not discussed. Your personal and your private lives were not discussed. We as a society knew lying was a bad thing. And we knew it harmed society. We were looking out for the citizens of this country. And we don't like to be lied to. We know that leads to corruption. And now the news media and things like that, now they'll just take money for anything. And now there's a million psychics on there. And there's behind the scenes tape. I've seen it. Behind the scenes tapes of they get psychics on there and they'll say awful things like Mary loves Dick. And then they'll show tape after them of them laughing hysterically. Because she's like, oh, that was hysterical. I thought that was the best you could come up with, Ms. Mary's Love Dish. She's like, it took everything I had not to burst out laughing. And he's like, I know, wasn't it hysterical? Like, they all know it's a show. And it's just to rake in the whatever. And it's all these people go on, and now they do Randi's $1 Million Challenge just to get the publicity. Like, I think it's awful. They all do the challenge. They know they'll fail, but then they go on YouTube and they say they won it. Because no one's going to pay attention. No one's going to watch the hour thing that says they lost it. They'll just believe the guy. And it's a boost for their sales. So anyway, I want to just, in the Insider Movies today, I want to bring us back. So if you can't tell, I'm dressed like, actually I've never seen her. I think I'm dressed like Tammy Faye. I think I'm dressed like a preacher's wife on one of the sales shows. I think I'm dressed like TBN, right? Which, by the way, I did have a family. Oh God, I didn't say that. I did have a family member taken in by it. And I didn't really understand it. I just knew my family was really upset because they just kept sending all their money in. And that's all they ever talked to my family. It was a really big dividing point in my family. That's why I get upset about the thing about Catholic versus Christian, calling them the same thing, because I'm like, they're so not. It was such a big, there's all these divides within that community. I'm so aware of it. My family was this one big war of all these different faiths. It's hysterical now because now the New Agers are like out there preaching with the Christians. They're like, oh, and now the leaders of Christ are out there at the same booths as the psychics because they all preach the same thing now. Like Soros has done an amazing job. And I'm just like, nice. So like, I don't know if there are any Christians left out there. I honestly don't know if there are any Christians left there. Whenever you've heard me talk about Christianity, I've been assuming it's been like, since I was a kid or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, this is the last time I looked in Christianity. Sorry. Like, and the Christians, you know what? Maybe it's because the Christians that I still know, like, they're all up. None of them go to church. Like, none of it, like I said, like, the ones that I know, they're, you know, they're very few and far between, but they don't go to church. They're all on their own. You know what I mean? And they're too busy to go. Like, they're you know, they're undercover and they're, you know, Hollywood would kill them, you know. So there's a lot of industries like that today. Like, you know, you have faith and you have to keep your mouth shut. It's been like that for Christians forever. I get that. So, I think ever since they banned Bibles from school, they didn't ban anything else, but they banned Bibles. And I really want you to think about that, about why they banned Bibles from school and banned Bible studies, you know, because I was thinking about it and I was like, I didn't think about it until I saw all this stuff today. You know, all the research today. I didn't sleep last night. I hope it doesn't show. But I didn't sleep last night. And so it's been like the last 48 hours I've been watching. And don't worry about me. I'm going to be all right. I know you guys are worried about me. I'm going to be okay. Like, please remember where I was a year ago. Like, I'm on my way up, right? On my way up. I can't believe this. I love this ring, but not with this. I'm like, it's so obnoxious with this. All right, I better just move on to the movies. So I better just move on. Let's move on to the movies. So the two movies that we're doing today are actually... both you really need to know, but one is like one of my favorite movies of all time. Why are we going to watch them? Because they are going to remind you of the church before 1992. So you need to see the movies anyway. Are they going to preach to you? No, not in the slightest. Are they going to maybe unveil the con? Yeah. It's going to remind you, you know what? Not the church. It's going to remind you of what charity is. Can we go with that? Let me give you an idea. One is going to be Robin Hood, the cartoon Robin Hood, one of my favorites of all time. And you know why I thought of that one? Because I was sitting there going, as they're running along the money along the sign, I was just like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? Like what happened? And stuff. I was like, wasn't pastors supposed to be? Like, what was pastors supposed to be? Like, weren't pastors supposed to be like this? And like, oh, like Friar Tuck, you know, because like that's the best sorry, it's been a long time or whatever. And I was like, oh, we're supposed to do Robin Hood anyway, one of my favorites. Now, does the whole movie revolve around Friar Tuck? No, but it's an excellent movie that will remind you of like what the rich do of sucking money from the poor and how the church at that time would serve the poor. Like what their job was amongst the community. Does that make sense? Like what their role was in the community. Like just kind of maybe spark plug some things. Like that's what it used to be known as. And maybe, you know, we had some opinions on, you know, whether or not laws should exist and stuff like that about taxation and things like that. That's for another day. You know, but they were written for things like that. They were written for when the church was like this, you know, when Friar Tucks were around. That's what those tax laws were written about. So it makes a bit more sense when you read it from that end. But the movie is so good. The movie's so good. And Friar Tuck's a very side character, okay? The main character is Robin Hood. And it's probably one of the best cartoons that Walt Disney ever made. One of the best movies Walt Disney ever made. And I think what I've really noticed about it is, like, let me give you an example, is like, I really loved it when I was a little kid. And then when I got older into teenage years, I loved it. And then somewhere in my 20s, like I was like, I am digging this movie. Like I'm really, like I think when I got freer and became my own person, I started really starting to dig it. Like, you know, I kind of got on my own 2 feet and stuff like that. And then I dug it a little more. And then when I got with my celebrity friends and we started doing our movie nights, and I was like, my friend from overseas, like they knew a different story of Robin Hood, of course. And we watched it and everything. And like, the group was just like, this movie is amazing. Like, it's kind of like how they were with Good Will Hunting. They were like, this movie is amazing. And we've watched it again. The other one, like there's another one, I think I've mentioned this before. They really like the Jane Austen Club, I think it is. Like the Jane Austen Book Club or something. It's something, and you wouldn't think, like, why would a Walt Disney movie and then the Jane Austen Book Club or something like that? It is that those are 2 movies that they just love watching. Like, you know, kind of like, we don't watch the Station Agent a lot, but like they love the Austen, and then they love the Austen Book Club. They think that's hilarious, but like they love this movie. They love Robin Hood. Like they think because it's, and the thing is that we're all adults. Like we don't have kids watching with us yet, and I don't think that's appropriate. But this would be more appropriate to watch with us. But that's what always amazed me about Walt Disney, the older I've gotten, is that he wrote movies, and that's why he made Disneyland. He actually made Disneyland. I got into Disneyland. I was an annual pass holder, so I got into it for a while. And then it really shifted. It really, really shifted, and we like quit, and I'm glad we quit. But it was really good for my health. Now I understand why it was good for my health. It kept my mobility going, and my mobility did really stop after. I would go to Disneyland walk. If you do both Disneylands, if you did both Disney's California Adventure and Disneyland, if you wear your little walker thing, you walk 14 miles a day. If you know how to do Disneyland, you do 14 miles a day. And it really kept my mobility going, because I would go late at night. I could only handle the dark. I know why that is now. And so I would go late at night. It was the only thing that was open late at night that kept you safe. California. I understand that now too. 50th in quality of living. So I needed an annual pass with Disneyland to stay safe in California. So I would go, and it would be open till 1 a.m. And so I could just walk and stay safe and stay cool and stay in the dark and just stay walking, you know, and it was really, really good. There was nowhere else in California you could do that. And it was good. And say if we lived further, I drove further, and it kept my mobility going, you know, and so that was a really bad thing when I lost that, you know. But the park really changed, and they made it more dangerous. They stopped doing lighting things. People started having really bad falls. It was really, really hard to watch. And it was really scary. Oh, gosh, I'm really going off on stuff. Maybe it's because I haven't slept. And we're at 27 minutes. My God, I'm so sorry. Okay, so anyway, Disney's, it is, when he made Disneyland, what he was doing is he was at a carnival, and he noticed that carnivals were made for kids. He was sitting there as an adult, and I think he was with his kids or his nieces and nephews. He was with kids, and his daughter or somebody was riding the carousel. Somebody, I don't know it that well, guys. Sorry, because I know there's some real big fanatics out there. But he was with a child or children, and they were riding the carousel. And as they were riding carousel, he was like looking around, noticing that all the adults were just standing there, and they weren't necessarily enjoying themselves. And he was like, you know, it would really be good if there was a park that was built for not just kids, but like adults and kids. And at that time, the carnivals were all built for little children. Like it was just built for the children. He's like, what if there was a theme park that was like, or if there weren't even theme parks back then. But he's like, what if there was a carnival that was built for like adults and kids? Like that they would both enjoy. You can do that. And that is why his rides are built now. The new rides aren't. But the old rides, if you go into the original, they're built at such a high level. And what I mean by high level is every single thing. Oh God, Disney's going to be late. But I'm giving away secrets. So, because they haven't figured this out yet. But everything had so much detail so that you can ride a ride 30 times and you'll still miss details on it. And that's what makes you coming back, is that he put so much detail into every ride. so much that it kept the adults. So you could go as a child all the way up. And what makes that is a critical thinker. It makes the mind grow and the imagination grow. And what happens is so if you look at a wall, that wall won't just be painted black, and then it won't be just painted black and red. He will have like 30 things going on that wall. And then he won't just have it be flat. He'll have like 20 textures on that wall, or like, or 6 or 8 textures on that wall. He will have a full story going on that wall, and he will have it going through the whole thing. And so what happens is, and he didn't keep it like light. He had dark things. Like my mother once said, she's like, that's why I love skulls. Because there were like skulls. There were skulls in Snow White. He didn't like hands off on children, which is good for children, like Bridge to Terabithia. You want it. You don't give it to a kid after they lost a loved one. You give it to a kid before they lose a loved one, so they're prepared for loss. You know what I mean? Like you give it to kids for them to prepare for loss. Things like A Wrinkle in Time and things like that deal with tough issues. You want them to deal with tough things, and Blackbird Pond and all Katie Woodlawn and all these things that deal with like tougher issues and stuff like that. You want them to deal with like more multi-layered things so that they can handle it. Like, shoot, I read Gone with the Wind when I was 10 years old. Does that tell you anything? I loved it. Like, I was a big reader. I just consumed. I mean, it was an escape for me, but that is how fast the mind can grow, because I was just at the public library all the time. And I just was like, and your kid can do that too. I mean, your kid absolutely can. And trust me, it shuts them up. You know what I mean? Don't you remember the stories of like when the parent used to get upset because you saw the flashlight under the bed and you were like, frickin' put the book down? That's what used to keep a kid up at night, not video games. It was having the light on, being underneath a book, having their mind expand and grow and making them into geniuses. So anyway, so this is what he did. He applied it into his cartoons, is that he also made it high level. He made it something that adults would enjoy as well, so that if the kids watched it, the adults would laugh as well. So he made all these like jokes, and it just makes you laugh hysterically, as an adult. But it wasn't jokes that were dirty or anything like that for kids. So he did this genius thing of something that was funny for both adults and kids, and that's very difficult to do. And if you know anything about animation, they still teach. Disney wrote all these laws of animation. Sorry, I did graphic design. You guys know that. But he has these laws of animation. And Disney himself, Walt Disney, wrote the laws of animation. Things about like if you have a ball bounce, the bounce should hit, and then it should have a in, and then it should have a and then it should have all these things, a bump, a in, and There should be all these different reactions. All of that. It shouldn't just be a hit and then up. There should be a hit and then a compress and then an expand. I mean, genius stuff that he created. That was Walt Disney who made that stuff. And those laws of animation, like, you need to know that stuff if you're going to be an animator. It's what makes something good or genius. It's things of motion that we don't realize that we're looking for that makes a movie good or bad, and that a lot of animators just don't do. It's why something looks flat to us, and why old animated classes look so good, because the motion looks real to us. Like, it looks like, oh, when we see something hit, we see this hit and because that's what our bodies actually feel when we hit something. We actually feel a reverberation, and they just show these bah, and if you don't fully see the wrap around and let the person feel it, it doesn't resonate as much when you're watching it. And that's why Robin Hood is so great. It is just a film that you're really, really going to love. And your kids can watch it too. And so when you see Friar Tuck in the corner and you see people who are poverty, we are back in that system. I am sorry. You're also going to relate to it. It's going to be hard because you're going to see how much they're taxing people, and you're going to be like, no kidding. I mean, in Boston, I just read a story because I've been following Lively for Governor, and he was tweeting out about how much more the governor, the GOP governor, who's acting exactly like a Democrat governor, he was tweeting out about how many more taxes they're adding on. And I had to go through to do one of these trips that I just did to get you guys a big thing. I haven't shown it to you yet, but I did something really special. So I had to drive through Boston, and everything's patched up there, like patch. And I was like, this is California. It was identical to, and I didn't think anything was as bad as California's roads. California's roads are dangerous. Now, Boston's supposed to be a really rich city. They've got Cape Cod. They've got all these things. Boston's got Harvard. It's rich. Everyone's driving around in Lexuses and stuff like that. It is a wealthy city, and everything's being patched. It's got all these super big hospitals. It is a wealthy city. Huge donors, and here everything's patched. Like California, and you just drive around, and even going into, like, you go turn hospitals where all these things are, and it's just like thunk, thunk, thunk. And I was like, this is almost worse than California. That's like third world. I've been on third world streets that are better than that. I've been on third world dirt streets like 3 times better than that, than Boston. That's cheap. And here he's raising taxes $300 million for what? Somebody's pocket? Like that's, and so when I hear that, what do I think of? I think of Robin Hood, and I think of the poor pauper who has a broken leg, who has a cast, and I think of them going thunk, thunk, thunk on the cat and getting a gold coin and sliding out of it into his hand, and you'll see that scene in Robin Hood. Genius. I think of that. So just think of that. All right, and then the last movie is going to be, and I hope I remember it. Oh, now I remember it. Leap of Faith. Leap of Faith. And you need to know Leap of Faith for Steve Martin. And Steve Martin, I mean, you need to know Steve Martin. Sorry, I love Steve Martin. So just have a, I'm going to try and talk about him. I love him. So, you know, Dave Letterman did this monologue I saw recently when I was going through all the con artists, and all these different kind of videos come up, you know, so sometimes other subjects pop up, a range of subjects. My goodness, I have seen quite the range of subjects. Con artist leads to a whole range of subjects. You know, especially like when one's an atheist and one's a Christian, it ends up going both, and I'm just like, where did I got to David Letterman talking about Jay Leno. Don't ask me how it went there. It did. So I'm just like, sure, all right. And then Sylvia Brown and it's been fun. So so all the way to Benny Hinn and his nephew actually leaving the church and exposing Benny Hinn, which I thought was very interesting. That and he gave like a testimony, which I listened to. Like I had to listen to that. Like I was just like, you left, and so I listened to it. But the only way he's doing it, he's not really doing it on public. He did it on thing, and so they were like, "Can you give us your testimony?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Oh, well, I guess this is the way to hear the story." Like I tried to listen to 2 different and both of them were like his. So I listened to it. Do you know what's really interesting is that he left his family. Like he said, I had to leave. Like I had to he's like, I had to like leave. And I was like, you mean like the one person I've heard online actually leave their family is like this other guy, like he didn't cut off his family. He cut off Benny Hinn. I'm like, great. So my closest thing to my family so far is Benny Hinn. Woo! That's how bad my family is. A guy who's killed people. Sorry, I was just like, sounds appropriate. Sounds about right. I was like, right. That sounds just about right. That works. I was like, that's just about right. I was listening to him and I was just, he got to part family. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm relating to this part. This is really, really weird. And then I was like, oh, right. He cut off Benny. Yeah, right. It's my family, right. All right, I guess I can see that. I was just like, I guess I can see that. I was just like, all right. So, and then I was kind of like done. I kind of moved on after that. I was like, I think that's enough I can handle for now. So anyway, the other side of it though, when I saw the Letterman thing, when he talked about Jay Leno, I just remember watching, he said, I didn't want to talk about Jay Leno and Conan. He said, but here I am, I'm going to talk about Jay Leno and Conan. He said, you know, I can't believe Jay said, don't blame on this and Conan. And he's like, of the thousands of words that have been written, don't blame on this and Conan. Now, it reminded me of the guy in North Carolina who got exposed for his church. He had gone on church and he's like, it's not that great of a house. And then when it got exposed of how big of a house it really was, he's like, all right, it's a great house. And, people can question me and it's okay. The guy's a full charmer. Like he changes. He's a chameleon. He changes for what the community. And what's I've noticed is they all participate in the drama triangle. They go victim to rescuer to persecutor. Like first they persecute the TV crew. And then when that doesn't work, then he goes to victim. He's like, well, whatever. And then he goes to rescuer. They can do whatever they want to do. Like they're good people. They can do everything. Like I'm going to rescue them. Let them do their thing. I'm going to say, we are going to take them. We're going to save the news or whatever. And they just sit in there and the audience just goes with him in this drama triangle. They're either like saving him as a victim or they're like persecuting, they're just with the guy in the drama triangle. And that's what every single one of these con artists does. Whether it's the psychic or whether it's either the left or the right, they're always in this drama triangle, a persecutor, victim, or a rescuer. Always, because it's addictive. Being a victim or being in that drama triangle is very, 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 very addictive. But try and leave it. Try and be your own person. Try and be an individual. And it will trigger narcissistic rage. Try and think for yourself. Say, maybe I don't agree with them. Maybe they might be wrong. You will trigger narcissistic rage. And it won't be just narcissistic rage on the part of the leader. It will be narcissistic rage on the part of the followers. That's always a sign of a cult. Not a good thing. So, leap of faith. But what Letterman was pointing out is he was saying Jay Leno was doing the exact same thing. When his narcissism was being pointed out, when he was shoving a guy aside and the world was seeing Jay Leno for who he was, he was like, don't blame Conan. He was changing the story. That's what a genius does. If you don't like the story, change it, And so Mad Men, we learned that on Mad Men. If you don't like the story, change it. And so Jay Leno didn't like the story that he was a bad guy and shoving people out. And so he changed it. He's like, don't blame Conan. Don't blame Conan. No one was blaming Conan. And so, Letterman saw it. He saw it and he called it out. He was like, you got to be kidding me. And he called it out. And that's the kind of it. And then he was like, oh, there I did. I said too much, and then somebody put a quote at the end of it. It had like 5 million views and it said there's never, when he said, there you go again, I said too much. I was like, oh my gosh, I can so relate. Because I always say to you guys, I said too much. Like my video on Tommy Robinson, I told you I wasn't going to post it because I was just like, I said too much. I talked about porn. I said too much. I said too much. And then you guys were like, why wouldn't you post that? Like, why? Why wouldn't you post it? And I'm just like, because it's about porn. Like, it's hard. It's hard to talk about. Like, that's a rough subject. That's really like, that's it. And you guys were like, why? And I was thinking that about, and I was watching Letterman and I was going, right when he's like, I said too much. And I was like, no, that's what we want to hear. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what my followers were saying to me. Like, right when you say more than you think you should say is right when your followers are like, keep talking. And I was like, and then this quote came up on the board and it said, there's never an off switch on genius. And I was just like, that reminds me of Steve Martin. Like they're that brand. And Steve Martin did work with Disney. He worked at Disney. He did. He worked at Disney and he did magic tricks. And I think he got his start there actually. And so he's come back and done some reprisals and things like that. And I don't know if he's done anything in politics recently. I don't know if he's done anything with Billy Crystal. So you might be like, what the heck's wrong with you? But I just, Steve, his work, he's so dedicated to making you laugh. And and maybe Disney instilled this in him because he was working at Disney when it was a different kind of company, not, communist Disney. which I think Disney switched to Sharia now, quite frankly. It looks like they switched sides. There were some things behind the scenes. So, but either way, they're the same thing we've learned, whatever. But either way, don't give your money to Disney. Oh my gosh. It's such a bad thing that they bought Fox. My God. It just, there's everything's owned now by the same people. But Steve Martin kind of has that idea that is in Robin Hood, like try and make everyone laugh. His jokes try and make everyone laugh. So he doesn't go for a joke that goes kind of here. He's always kind of considering a wider audience. And he kind of tried to pick his movies that way. There are always some people that always kind of picked a certain type of movie. Steve didn't. He really picked this like broader audience kind of movie. And he did serious movies. He did funny movies. But he just did, now that I think of it, maybe he did like, gosh, I didn't think about it, but like, oh gosh, no. I was trying to think of what it could be. Maybe American values as in freedom, like American values as in freedom, like what we're learning is American values, the 90%. Like there wasn't any left, like all the movies, there was like no propaganda. That's what it was. He always did like agenda-free movies. There we go. Like the movies never had any agenda in them. I'd have to watch them again, but I'm pretty sure the agenda was to make you laugh. From what I remember, the agenda was to make you laugh. At least the ones that he just, like My Blue Heaven and Leap of Faith. And Leap of Faith, that is my point, is that Leap of Faith wasn't necessarily an easy thing for him to do, because Leap of Faith, I don't think most actors would have taken it, because it was made at a time where church was much bigger. You know what I mean? He could have annihilated like 50% of his audience, and he still did it. And it was because it stuck to American values of we don't want to be lied to. When I saw it, I was like, I can see why you do this movie. I can see it, because it was about, con artists. It really, really struck at the heart of like American values of like, we don't want to be lied to, and we care about freedom and laughter and being unified. And that is what I wanted to say. I guess I want to wrap up with that, is that's the whole fighting against con artists is the heart of the American dream of that 90% of political beliefs coming together. What everyone from like Ben Shapiro to Dave Rubin and Danny Korem, this Christian, to James Randi, from here, I'll show you. Yeah, from Tragedy and Hope, Carol Quigley, who is himself an elite, but an incredibly, well, not an elite, but yeah, an elite, incredibly well studied, who wrote this for us. And what does he say in his thing? What does he open up with? This was a huge labor of love to warn us of what was coming so that we could vote it out, right? Before Agenda 21 ever came, to warn us. And what did he say? He said, to all who care and seek to help. I thought it was so interesting, because in this book, Tragedy and Hope 101, oh, nope, that's the wrong one. To this guy, The Naked Capitalist, the best book on tragedy and hope, and if you don't have time to read Tragedy and Hope, this is the one you should read, by Cleon Skuskin. Totally not. He worked in, I believe, the FBI, total opposite elite. Like, to all of them, totally different believers, all of them, like it's a testimony to the United States of America. They don't want to be lied to, and they want freedom for all. You know what I mean? They want freedom, and they want the criminals to be locked up. They want to be liars, to be punished, and con is just, they know the harm that con does. They know the harm that con artistry does, and they know that socialism is the greatest con of all, biggest con of all. It's not for the people, it's for the rich. And I I really love this. I think I'm going to end on this. So Leap of Faith is amazing by Steve Martin. And I love all of his movies. You need to know him. He's like one of the biggest stars, like Billy Crystal level. Like he really, really is. He was with that era. There's so many amazing movies of his. But Leap of Faith goes into... It kind of goes into like the Benny Hinn. Actually, I believe he wears a white suit in it. Now, it's hysterical. I thought Benny Hinn was dead. Like, they had done so many things on Benny Hinn. I didn't realize that he actually began like it began like an actual set. I didn't know it began a whole new that's just Christianity now. Like, that faith healing has just become the Christian church now. You know, that's just it. So, like, I'm just like, oh, so it just doesn't exist because they, someone did a great thing. They did excerpt of everything that they say about the Christian teaching. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to have to do a thing on world religions about what every single one teaches. Because luckily, when I was really young, I had really good classes on all of that before this, because nothing, they started the seeds of everything. Like I said, they did it so very carefully that it didn't get, they slowly rolled it out in the schools. You know what I mean? So, it didn't really, for example, this Benny Hinn stuff, some of this, for example, let me give you one of these preachers. One of these preachers actually said that if you don't tithe, he would take all the tithers, put them up at the front of the church, and mow them down with machine guns. And the guy who aired it was just kind of like, Jesus didn't make it a commandment. Wasn't in the New Testament. And I was just like, ooh. Because you can't find any of those clips without some pastor presenting it. So I learned a lot about the New Testament too. Which I have been saying, well, if you're a Christian, you should learn the New Testament. Found out they don't even do that anymore. Christian churches don't even teach from their Bibles. And I'm like, gosh, sounds familiar. Sounds like Islam. They don't actually read their Quran. So the Christian church has become a lot like Islam. The Islamists, they don't actually read their Qurans. Most of the Muslim world, they are not able to read, so they don't read the Quran. They actually don't know what it says. They rely on their imams to tell them what it says. And it turns out, I'm finding out from this wonderful lady who's a journalist, she actually has studied, she's been studying it, and each of the governments, like Saudi Arabia and Iran, they changed the Quran. The Quran doesn't even mention the freaking hijab. It doesn't even mention covering the hair. But Saudi Arabia and Iran, their version of the Quran, it puts the hijab into the verse. It changes the text. She has 2 Qurans up, and she's like, well, this one suddenly has a hijab in it. Wonder who it's published by. Flip, flip, flip. Saudi Arabia, where it's a law for the woman to cover up. And I'm like, oh, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm pretty sure religion is not supposed to change the text on which they are based. And then I find out that, pastors aren't teaching from the text from which they are based. Remember how I was laughing about Catholicism? And I was like, they don't even, read from the Bible? It turns out the Christians don't either. That whole exposition teaching or thing or whatever. I learned that word. Thank you very much. Exposition teaching, where you take a few verses and then you teach the verses. You just teach the verses. Yeah, that's not done. Nope. And I had been like, I thought that was the difference, is that's what the non-denominational did. And that's it. No, non-denominational doesn't even do that. They're worse than the Catholics. At least the Catholics read out verses. Pfft. Nope. So I will end on this. So Leap of Faith is amazing, and it's Steve Martin, and you need to know it, and he's incredible. And now that I think about it, he wears a white suit, and I'm starting to think that maybe it might be on Benny Hinn. But it's incredibly funny, and it's incredibly insightful. But it's based on, the tent revivals. But that used to be a really, really big thing. I mean, tent revivals and the faith healing, it's really big in our history. In American history, it is a big, huge thing. But in the 80s and 90s, it was becoming a thing of our past, tent revivals. We were like, oh, we're becoming a smarter society, more information's out there. We know that that's fake, and we're more educated, and we know the tricks. We know those are magic tricks. We know this is it, and we're not a con artist society anymore. We got past it. Even the 70s, we grew out of it. Like, they had been big back in the 1800s. That's why I love Little House on the Prairie. I learned about that way later in life. And when I saw Little House on the Prairie, you know why I liked it? Because it was based on books of a girl who grew up back then. And it's like a time capsule. And what I liked about it was learning about all the snake oil. It shows like real live snake oil salesmen that came through. And you get to find out what con artists were like back then. And now I'm like, the same stuff's being done. But I'm realizing that part of the reason I understand, now that I've watched like, Danny Korem and James Randi, I'm realizing the reason I'm skeptical when I watch the shows is because I've seen things like Little House on the Prairie now. And I know the history. And I'm like, oh, that's snake oil salesman. And I'm like, crap, what if someone hasn't seen Little House on the Prairie? And they don't know our history with snake oil salesmen. They don't know that exists. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Like, no wonder that show played so long. And it was so popular, like, no wonder. Because it taught us American history, what we learned and what we learned to guard against, if that makes sense, as a nation. And what we got through and what to drive out. Ugh. All right, so I'm going to end with this. Talk about driving out. I'm going to end with the Naked Capitalist. It's very quick, so we can learn about this. Who is trying to take over the world? Keep in mind, this was written all the way back in 1970. I think the communist conspiracy is merely a branch of a much bigger conspiracy. The above statement was made to this reviewer several years ago by Dr. Bella Todd, a former member of the National Committee of the U.S. Communist Party. Perhaps this is an appropriate introduction to a review of Tragedy and Hope. She said she first became aware of some mysterious super leadership right after World War II, when the U.S. Communist Party had difficulty getting instructions from Moscow on several vital matters requiring immediate attention. So she was the leader of the U.S. Communist Party, and she first started thinking that maybe there was something bigger at play because she couldn't get her messages to Moscow. At that time, Moscow was the big Soviet Union. It was the big Communist Party leader, and she couldn't get her messages. As head of the Communist Party in America, she couldn't get her messages to Moscow. The American Communist Party hierarchy was told that anytime they had an emergency of this kind, get this, they should contact any one of 3 designated persons at the Waldorf Towers. It goes on to say it was 3 white men, 3 rich white elite men. And the longer and longer it went on, it was just those 3 rich white elite men. And she finally realized it wasn't going to Moscow, it was just going to them. The elites of New York. And she was like, I don't think any of this is being directed from Moscow. And that's what Tragedy and Hope talks about. Tragedy and Hope talks about how the rich, the Rothschilds, and all of this, it outlines how the Rothschilds and the J.P. Morgans of this world, which actually you can trace back after J.P. Morgan died, they found out from his records that his wealth was actually owned by Rothschilds. Soros, his first loan from Rothschild. Owning Reuters is a big thing. Funding all of World War I, and all the world wars back in the 1800s. When you fund countries, all the Western countries, when you're the World Bank of the Western countries, that's it. You're it. So, yeah, when you're the guys, they started communism in Russia. They funded communism in Russia through mobs. We already learned that through our research, and Dick Morris did a video on it. They funded it through Germany, funded the mobs through Germany. Then they funded communism in China through mobs in China. That's also all in Tragedy and Hope. And now they're funding it through the UN, through worldwide, the rest of the world. In South Africa and the Arab worlds and in the US. And that is why President Trump just said at the UN, which I just was like, I was tweeting the whole way through. Did you see me? I was just the whole afternoon, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Because the first time he went up, I didn't see the speech, but I guess he said at the beginning of the speech, he said, last year I said I'm going to be investing in America. And that's what I did. I invested in America. Our GDP grew 4.1%. Our job rates are up, He said, this year, he said, socialism is this. He said that America is dedicated to independence and cooperation. We love your countries. We love your cultures. We will never interfere with your cultures. We will never interfere with your traditions. We're not going to interfere with your religions, which is the key thing I've been pointing out. China is going around doing the same thing we did with economic hitman. When we did economic hitman, though, we did it to trade for votes at the UN to sustain democracy in the world. We never demanded that they change their currencies. We never demanded that they change their culture. We never demanded that they change their religion. We never demanded that we never took their oil. We never took their wealth. We never took their ore. We never took their minerals. We never invaded. We never even colonized, which is what the British did. They colonized. We didn't do that. China is now doing the economic hitman. That's what the One Silk Road is, right? One Belt, One Road. They're colonizing. They're taking over the mines. They're taking over the money. They're changing out the money for their money. They're actually putting in, they're not even hiring the people. They're only hiring their people. They are colonizing and they are wiping out the culture. They're changing the culture to their culture. They're demanding that their culture turn to their culture. They're killing their infrastructure. They are completely, and so what POTUS was saying is that we will not do any of that. We are interested in independence and cooperation, working with you side by side. We will not interfere with your religion because China doesn't. China outlaws all religions. It says we will allow 5 religions if you change them, not Judaism, 5 religions. It allows Catholicism, it allows Christianity, it allows Islam, and it allows 2 others. I can't remember what they are. Judaism isn't allowed. And in those 5, they only allow them if they convert to socialism and say that socialism is the one way. And then the others can come below. And socialism believes in atheism. So you have to sign a document in those 5 religions that says there is no God. So that's actually not really a religion, right? And if you don't, you get sent to a concentration camp. And they are spreading that through all of these countries. That's colonizing. So he goes up there and he says, we will respect your religions. We will respect your language. We will respect everything there is about you. And then he says, all we ask in return is that you respect our sovereignty as a nation. And you could just feel it. And I just kind of like, I was like, oh. Because if you've been following through Agenda 21, they haven't. Since 1992, they have not respected our sovereignty as a nation. They have been going in and they have been taking over our schools and our local governments. The UN has. And he was letting them know, I know. And I'm not touching you. Why are you touching us? We've never taken anything from you. And you're buying us out? And you could just feel them be like, what are we rethinking? Like, what were we thinking? Like, now we have China on our back, buying us out and killing us all. And what were we thinking? I could just feel it. I could just feel them being like, afterwards, just being like, what were we thinking? Because he just said it. I really encourage you to watch that speech. I'll try and link it below. So anyway, so I would say the UN is the biggest con artist of all because they funded everything that's going on in Islam. They funded everything that's going on in Christianity. You know, Islam is a huge con because they actually teach lying. They actually teach lying. And this Christianity thing, you know, they teach the Quran. The Quran teaches lying, right? But this Christianity thing, they're actually teaching something other than scripture. I'm going to have to look into what the hell is going on in Judaism because that's the great thing is that, like I said, I had great classes. So the classes I had, luckily, like they were later on, but I don't think the education, like I said, Like my education system, it was after 2000 when I saw Soros come into my school, but I was teaching high school. So things rolled out. I think they rolled out in the university system. Like I've been trying to analyze when things rolled out into the education system. I think they rolled out the internet first. I've been trying to learn, like I've been looking at what they rolled out first. Like they've been very, 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 they bought out certain things first. They rolled out things first. And before they hit, they kind of were like laying a foundation. And actually, I think they went after the Christian church first. Now that, now that I think about it, I'm like, what were they going after first? And come to think about it, all these big revival churches, sorry, my jewelry's hurting. All these big revival churches, the big horrible teachings I've been hearing and them suddenly booming were all in the late 90s. So maybe that's the first thing. Remember how I said the book Persecution came out? That was like in 99. So maybe that was one of the first layers. Maybe the first layer was the internet, and the second layer was like get the Christians out of the schools. And then if you get the Christians out of schools, then you can move into communism. Oh, maybe. Interesting. If there's no Bible studies and then all the Christians move to private schools and charter schools. Oh, I'm starting to see it. Oh, see, I always figure things out on camera with you guys. What a horrible insider movies. I'm sorry that I'm not as fun as I used to be, but I can't help it. I'm growing, and my doctor says to do this for fun, it makes me better. So I love you guys so much. Thank you for putting up with me for an hour and 5 minutes. Mwah. But good news, Halloween's coming up. So, okay, so for those of you who are freaking out about Halloween, just a preview of Halloween, you know what? I'll do that on a separate video. Okay, I love you guys. Mwah. Bye. Watch these videos. Oh, that's right. Yes, like an hour and 5. Okay. If you could donate $1 or more per episode, I would really, really appreciate it. If you could do that, please, because yes, I would really appreciate your donation. God, I almost said tithes. Yeah, here. Can I talk with a Southern accent? Can I talk with a Southern accent? All right, y'all now. I can't even do it. I'm going to cry. I can't even do it. I can't be a con artist. No. If you guys could just go ahead and be nice. No, don't be nice. Oh my God, no. No, don't be nice. Oh, I just watched the stupid videos. And then you can set your donation amount. That's right. It starts at 0, so you can start your donation amount. And now I've talked way longer about donations than I like talking about. Mwah, I love you guys. I love you. If you love me too, then you can donate. There. That. And I promise no riches at all. Except that I know that my doctor's bills will get paid. That's what I can promise. I can promise that. That is what I can promise. I can promise you doctor's bills will get paid. That's for sure. That's for sure. You guys got me to 50% of my doctor's bills got paid off. That was the last count we heard. And I just was like, oh, of course, then we had the summer of procedures. But still, do you understand after 10 years getting 50% of my doctor's pills paid off? Do you know what that was? Like, I mean, it was before the year, before the year of procedures, but still, that was MRIs and everything like that. Like, yeah, I had a big cry that night. So there are other kind of miracles in this world. There's a whole life outside of that. So I just had to do this video. I hope you guys can understand that I just don't think we should be lied to. Whatever faith you're in, you know what I mean? Whatever faith you're in, get to your scriptures. I don't know what else is going out there. Kabbalah. I don't know what's going out there in Buddhism. The things that I deal in, when it comes to Hollywood, usually there's just a bunch of Hollywood is like Scientology. All right. That's what goes on in Hollywood is Scientology, so those are the kind of things I deal with. That's why I do, those are the things I'm dealing with. So, and I would say with Scientology, they're always reading their scriptures or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's a different thing. But I just think with these other religions, like you need to get back to find out, make sure you're reading what it's saying. No, that's not true. Like Scientology hides things from you. You make you pay. They make you pay to get your hands on what it says. No, you can find it online. Go online and find out what it says. You can find Xerox copies of it. Don't pay $30,000 to find it. Go find out what it says. Same thing with Mormonism. There it is. It's online. You can find out what your religion believes. You don't need to wait for it. You can go find it out. There are copies of it online. You should find out. You should find out what it teaches. And this whole thing, Judaism, Torah over here, Old Testament, New Testament, Jesus over here, Buddha, go back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, go to each of your texts. Because I don't know what the heck is going on out there. But like, and the Quran, you better find out what your Quran says. You better find out, so, because the 1%'s getting rich off this religion thing. So, I'm Tammy Faye or Tammy Lee or Tammy whatever Baker. I'm signing out. Mwah. Bye. Donate below. Mwah.